campaign later. We don't need this. No.
Thought you did.
Yeah, I don't want to trip over it.
Okay. I've got a couple minutes, so they're right.
They just gave you their lifeline.
They're wrong.
Good morning, dear friends, and welcome on this kind of warm Sunday morning in February to the Unitarian Fellowship at Stony Brook. A special welcome to those who are here for the first time and all of you who are attending virtually. Hello there. My name is Vivian Valoria Fisher, and I am happy to be your worship associate this morning. Our minister is the Reverend Madeline Campbell. Deborah Little is our Director of Religious Services, Religious Education, and is our service leader this morning. Information about our religious education program for children and youth may be found on our website, UUFSB.org. Please join us after the service for coffee and conversation. For those of you who are watching the service online, if you sign off after the service and return to our website, you will find the link for joining our small group chats. Whether you are right here or online, you will find some friendly folks who can answer any questions you may have. We have 3 announcements this morning. Our Racial Concerns Committee is helping us celebrate Black History Month this February. There will be a series of 3 facilitated discussions. Well, actually, we're in the midst of celebrating it. There will be a series of 3 facilitated discussions of the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. If you haven't already done so, we hope you will pick up a copy of this thought-provoking book, start reading, and plan to join the discussions. There are many copies of the books in the Suffolk County Libraries. Childcare is available for these discussions. Please contact Deb Little as soon as possible to make arrangements. Second announcement. Would you like to be a direct participant in the discussions that will influence the core of our faith for years to come? If so, consider submitting your name to our nominating committee to serve as a delegate for our fellowship at the General Assembly of UU congregations. This is where we'll be electing the next president of UUA and holding the first vote on the proposed revisions of the UUA and holding the first, which include changes to our UU principles and sources, along with other votes, events, and actions. It is possible to attend in person in Pittsburgh or virtually. For further information, see the Call for Delegates article in our February newsletter and/or speak with Denominational Affairs Representative Laura Lesh over there. The deadline for submitting your name to Dan Weymouth, nominating committee chair, and there are some people who just do everything, is February 15th. The third and surprise announcement is the Fellowship Stewardship Campaign will kick off in March. For the first time since 2019, we'll be able to kick off the campaign with a dinner here at the Fellowship. It will be on the evening of Saturday, March 4th. Please mark that date on your calendars and watch your news feed for more details. Would you sound the bell or not? I'm sound, okay. Let us now enter into the sacred space of worship with the sounding of the bell. Please turn off the volume on your devices as the bell's vibration calls us to worship. We have begun the practice of sending a traveling chalice to individual homes. The sign-up sheet for taking the chalice is in the foyer. This is not just for children, it is for any and all of us. This past week, the Fleischer family has had the chalice at their home. I invite them to bring the traveling chalice box up to the front and to light our chalice. These are the words of John Lewis. And if you follow your truth down the road to peace and the affirmation of love, if you shine like a beacon for all to see, then the poetry of all great dreamers and philosophers is yours to manifest in a nation, a world, a community, a beloved community that is finally at peace with itself. Yeah, okay. The Allison family will take our traveling chalice home this week. Would you come up to receive it? The opening song is Take the A Train.
I think we can all go home now and just dance. Thank you very much. So good morning and welcome to each and every one of you. I'm very happy to be with you. Our opening words are titled Witness's World, and they were written by Tanya Marquez. I'll read them in English, and Vivian will then read them in Spanish. It is now, when we are called as witnesses of the world, to mend it, to change its course, to restore it. It is now, when we are called to act on our values, not to hide, not to fear, but to be bold and loud. It is now that we are called to continue our fight for justice, to organize, to speak up. It is now. Let us gather. Let us give each other courage.
What an opening hymn. If you weren't tapping, you must have been napping. I could see the feet going. Es ahora que estamos llamados a ser testigos del mundo, a enmendarlo, a cambiar su curso, a restaurado. Es ahora que somos llamados a vivir nuestros valores, a no escondernos, a no temer, sino a ser audaces y a hacer ruido. Es ahora que somos llamados a continuar nuestra lucha por la justicia, a organizarnos, a levantar las voces. Es ahora, reunámonos, démonos valor unos a otras, celebremos. I am now going to read a book, a children's book. No?
Hymn.
Time for all ages.
Hymn.
Hmm?
114, hymn.
Oh, I forgot the hymn. Sorry, there's another hymn. They're going to wow us again. Number 114. Please rise or stay seated as you please and join in singing hymn number 114, Forward Through the Ages. I didn't understand the English. I was in my Spanish mode. Okay, this is a book by Tammy Charles, All Because You Matter. They say that matter is all things that make up the universe, energy, stars, space. If that's the case, then you, dear child, matter. Long before you took your place in the world, you were dreamed of like a knapsack full of wishes carried on the backs of your ancestors as they created empires, pyramids, legacies. Building, inventing, working beneath red-hot suns and cold blue moons, thinking of you years ahead because you always mattered. On the night you were born, stars sprayed across the sky, each one full of life, hope, love, and all the moments in your life that would matter. Like your first steps, bare feet planted on cold floor, wobbling, hobbling, toppling, only to stand and try again. Or your first words spoken aloud like a lullaby to the sky, Mama, Papa, Mahal Nakita. Or the first time you opened a book, the words and pictures coming together like sweet jam on toast. Musica blasting through the barrios, sun and blue sky, all because you matter. But in galaxies far away, it may seem that light does not always reach lonely planets, covered moons, stars unseen, as if matter no longer exists. Just like the moons hidden in the dark, there will be times when you too will question your place in the universe. Like the time you hear your teacher call your name, Hassam Uzuomake Yardenis, and the whispers and giggles begin, followed by, what kind of name is that? Or the time when your pop-pop turns on the news and you see people everywhere. Take a breath. Take a stand. Take a knee. And you hear your pop-pop's whispered prayers as another name is called. Trayvon, Tamir, Philando. And you wonder if they will ever matter. But did you know that you do? Did you know that you were born from queens, chiefs, legends? Did you know that you are earth? That strength, power, and beauty lie within you. You matter. They matter. We matter and always will. Amen. I invite you to join in singing the Reeb Children's Benediction, located on the very last page of your hymnals. Children, please follow your RE teachers out of the sanctuary and down the hall to your RE classroom.
We now come to that part of the service where we take some moments for silence and meditation and reflection. I will share some words to help guide us into our silence, and Joanne will bring us out of that silence with hymn number 123 in your hymnal. Our meditation words today come from the Reverend Teresa Soto in her text, "To the People Who Have Mistaken Freedom for Liberation." I've been told that these very words were also used last week. I decided that they are so important that we should hear them again. Please take a breath in and out, and in and out, and once more, in and out. To be free, you must embrace the breadth of your own existence without apology, even if they try to take it from you. You must know not that you can do whatever you want. You are not a kudzu vine eating entire hillsides for the purpose of feeding your own lush life. You must know instead that inside you are entire universes, milky blue, magenta, and gold, expanding. But to actually be free, you must know and you must fight for the entire universe inside everyone else. Being free is not a license, but a promise.
The invitation to the offering. It is our spiritual practice to connect with an organization that works towards a more just tomorrow. Our shared plate recipient for February is the Women's Diversity Network. This organization works through its Health Equity Task Force to promote positive health outcomes for Black women and other vulnerable populations. They also join local advocacy groups in working to eliminate racial bias and systemic racism in policing and community safety. They run a youth leadership program and offer anti-racist training programs. Please give with generosity to support this worthy organization. And during the offertory, I invite you to take the card you collected in the foyer, together with a pen, and write down your relationship or feelings about or commitment to the eighth principle and the fight to end racism and oppression. Drop your cards in the basket in the foyer after the service. Deb is going to set up a display. Circle of Concern, the 2020 report of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change, the authors wrote, justice-seeking practices of Unitarian Universalists are often not grounded on spiritual or ritual principles. Instead, justice-seeking takes the place of ritual and religious life. Justice practices cannot be used as surrogates for deepening our spiritual lives. Justice work has been a proxy, sorry. I did my phone, I didn't do my iPad, sorry. Justice practices cannot be used as surrogates for deepening our spiritual lives. Justice work has been a proxy for what we believe in some congregations. Our justice work without theological resources and spiritual practices leads us down the path of burnout.
I've worked on social justice for decades, and I have experienced what I then called burnout. This statement struck me. What in our faith beyond the principles could feed my soul and help build my social justice work on a spirituality that I believed. Everybody awake now? Theology for UUs is not always a reasoning about God. For us, the Reverend Jen Crow said, theology is the individual system of meaning-making that we each develop throughout our lives. But what in our own theology can be a source of meaning-making? Why work to heal the world? Or why work to end racism and oppression? Today, I'm doing a sort of tour of some of UU theology, looking at 3 different theologies. I begin with the social gospel of the early 1900s. Then I turn to Latin American liberation theology as developed by Peruvian priest Gustavo Gutierrez. Finally, I look at the Black liberation theology of the Reverend James Cone and other UUs. Cone is a Christian. UUs have developed his theology. Our faith began with the heretical view of Universalists that they should work to establish the kingdom of heaven in this life, and that a living God, loving God would not condemn a portion of humanity to eternal damnation. This history in our faith seems to call us to address issues of equity, inclusion, and diversity. For how else can we establish the kingdom of God in this life? Our opening hymn, in fact, was a popular hymn of the social gospel period, which took place in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Social gospel theology arose alongside progressive era movements. In the hymn we sang, "Wider grows the kingdom, reign of love and light. For it we must labor till our faith is sight." The hymn calls us to the work of creating heaven on earth. The Reverend Clarence Skinner, probably the most famous Universalist of the first half of the 20th century, spearheaded the social gospel for Universalists. He wrote in the gendered language of his time,
The religion of the unities and the universals is a radical cure. It gets down to the roots out of which prejudice grows. Man must enlarge the borders of his consciousness to include the human race. We must think, feel, and act in universal terms, and thus see how petty and sinful are the partialisms of our lesser selves. The part becomes misunderstood only when we see it without relationships, as an end in itself. One race is no more necessary than one kind of tree or one kind of horse. Each has its own genius, and each may contribute to a life that is rounded, divine, complete.
Clarence Skinner grew up in a Universalist family. He came of age during a time of great optimism in this country. In the 1880s and 90s, the US was growing with a healthy economy, new technologies and types of communication like the telegraph and the telephone, new universities and expanding factories. Many people were hopeful that the grim past of the Civil War with its death and destruction was over. Out of this optimism arose social gospel theology. It developed in mainstream Protestant churches, but it really took root among Unitarians and Universalists. For alongside the tremendous growth and prosperity was the growth of extreme poverty. People poured into northern cities seeking work, but the cities could not accommodate all of these people. Horrific slums developed. No building codes, no sewers, no clean water. There was lots of disease and death. Buildings burned and entire blocks were razed. Working conditions were appalling. Child labor, 80-hour weeks, workplace injuries, terrible wages. Christian churches really had no contemporary theological answer to this suffering, or at least that's what religious liberals said. The Christian focus on individual and personal salvation was a misreading of the life of Jesus, they said. They determined that Jesus did not come to save souls for the afterlife, but rather came to save people in this world on earth. The new developments in knowledge and science and technology all were signs of God's evolutionary work through humanity. Social gospelers firmly rejected the traditional Christian views of man's sinful nature, as well as the idea that charity and good works were the proper religious response to suffering. They rejected the idea that God rewarded the good, often with material comfort, and punished the bad. They saw God as a personal, loving God. While mainstream Protestant churches split over this theology, and actually that split can tell us a lot about Protestant churches today. But UUs took to it. Some have said that social gospel theology cemented our UU rejection of the belief in the inherent sinfulness of humans and of a judgmental God. Social gospel theologians like Skinner said that we humans have everything we need to build the kingdom of heaven right here on earth. We did not need to die in order to get to heaven. So what work did social gospelers like Clarence Skinner do? They rolled up their sleeves. They worked on social issues, sewage systems, building codes, water treatment facilities, public fire departments, hospitals, schools, labor laws, unions, racial equality, and even birth control. Jane Addams, the social worker and creator of Hull House, wrote that Christianity needed to be seen in the social action of people, in their social relations, and in their attention to other people.
Liberation theology speaks to the underside of history and offers perspectives on issues such as poverty and oppression that we might otherwise miss. This is especially important as we respond to social problems. To be in solidarity with those who are oppressed requires empathy and imagination. The Reverend Dr. Paul Rasser.
So switching gears now, the theology, say that 3 times quickly, the theology that we call liberation theology arose in Latin America in the 1950s. It wasn't known by that name until the Peruvian priest Gustavo Gutierrez wrote a book called A Theology of Liberation in 1971. This theology is the foundation today of Black, Asian, womanist, Palestinian, and other liberation movements. The core belief is that the God of the Gospels has a preference for the most marginalized and oppressed among us. God loves everyone, according to this theology, but he especially blesses the poor and oppressed because they are so often treated as though they are not blessed or of worth. It is a demanding theology, which calls Christians to do political and social work to eliminate the immediate causes of poverty and injustice, and to emancipate the poor, downtrodden, and marginalized from everything that limits their capacity to develop themselves freely. It also calls Christians to liberate themselves from selfishness and sin, and to deepen their relationship with God and with other people. It might help us to remember Brian Stevenson's call to UUs at a recent General Assembly of the UUA. Stevenson challenged us to get proximate with the oppressed in order to dismantle the structures of oppression. So what is the basis of this belief in the preferential option of the poor? Gutierrez writes that God's love is gratuitous. It's not earned. God just loves humans. But he says, when Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor," he meant to take a stand against poverty. This was not a call for charity. Poverty is violence. Poverty means an early and unjust death. Material poverty, or the lack of goods and services necessary to meet basic human needs, is evil. And this evil calls every Christian to spiritual reflection. One response, probably the most radical response, is to enter into voluntary poverty by choosing to live together with the materially poor. This is the example from Jesus' life. By getting proximate to the oppressed, the poor, the ethnic minority, we can fulfill ourselves as people and opt to be with Jesus, which liberates us as well. We turn now to Black theology.
Racism is particularly alive and well in America. It is America's original sin, and as it is institutionalized at all levels of society, it is the most persistent and intractable evil. Though racism inflicts massive suffering, few American theologians have even bothered to address white supremacy as a moral evil and as a radical contradiction of our humanity and religious identities. The Reverend James Cone.
So Black liberation theology was founded by the Reverend James Cone. In 1966, 51 Black pastors bought a full-page spread in the New York Times, demanding a more aggressive approach to eradicating racism. Their demands echoed those of the Black Power movement, but they were grounded in the Bible. These pastors pointed to God's intimate connection with suffering and with the oppressed. Jesus, they said, set forth his mission as eradicating poverty and bringing about freedom and liberation. So this is liberation theology, to be clear. But why did it need to focus on Black liberation? Because, said Reverend Cone, the particular call to liberate the oppressed applies to particular oppressed people at particular moments in history. Jesus was a Jew, and he worked to liberate Jews in his time. Cone writes that we should consider Jesus to be Black, because the least in America are literally and symbolically present in Black people. To say that Christ is Black means that Black people are the oppressed people whom Christ has come to liberate. Perhaps you do not draw from the Bible for your spirituality and your moral anchor. Reverend Cone points repeatedly to our common humanity, by which he means the cultures of everybody, not the culture of the white dominant group in this society. UUs say that we believe that every person has inherent worth and dignity. Yet, another theologian, Dr. Paul Razor, whose quote you heard at the beginning, argues that we liberals also value our individual autonomy. We erect barriers around ourselves to protect us, to protect our autonomy. And this keeps us from doing the necessary anti-racism work in our communities. Why do we liberals, like us, have so much trouble with community? Because, Paul Razor argues, we fear the other. Many have written about the negative freedom embedded in our social and political theory, the idea that our rights, our boundaries, need to be protected from outsiders. But true anti-oppression work would lead us toward the other and into community. Now, we UUs don't often speak of evil. We certainly don't use that word in the sense of Satan. But Reverend Razor says the following: racism is an evil, a profound structural evil embedded deeply within our culture and within ourselves. It is a power in the biblical sense. Treating racism as an evil, a power that has us in its grasp, may help us to realize more clearly what we are up against. He adds, the evil of racism poisons our spirits as much as our, institutions. It gets inside us despite our best efforts to block it out, eating away at our hearts, eroding our capacity for expanded community. In the end, the evil of racism is spiritual. To end it, we must do structural and institutional work, to be sure, but we also must do soul work. I need to pause here and breathe. This is a lot. Makes my head hurt. And I admit that I came into Unitarian Universalism 25 years ago as a confirmed humanist with a pronounced Marxist, materialist, and feminist leaning. I understood structure, and I understood how things, including evil things, become institutionalized. But I was not prepared to think about spirituality. I learned that here, among you. These are only a few of the incredible theologians that UU's turn to for wisdom, understanding, and spiritual growth. But these theologies provide a spiritual foundation for my 8th principle work, though I struggle to live into them every day. I believe that we are called to create heaven or community on earth. I cannot find much meaning in my own isolated and autonomous growth. I believe that humans are social beings, that we become ourselves in community, and that we cannot be fully human without community. I know that we humans construct evil structures and that these systems like poverty and oppression and racism and capitalism and all the other isms, they take on a life of their own. They do have power over us, and they do claim our souls and spirits. This is our spiritual challenge, the challenge to live into our principles. I've always found connection and support in the communities engaged in social justice work. But the work and the suffering I have seen has also broken me at times. I think it may have been because it was not grounded in theological work and spiritual practices. I cannot do this work anymore without grounding it in soul work. Amen. So please rise or stay seated as you please, and join us in singing hymn number 149, the Black National Anthem, if you will. Lift every voice and sing. Very rousing. So our closing words today are by David Hicks McPherson. To wish for compassion, to pray for courage, to experience doubt, to bear sorrow, to strive for sureness. All these are qualities for which each of us should be grateful. But to feel a genuine fellowship for the whole human family, to act so that our empathy is evident wherever we go, that's the object. That's the lifelong goal.
We extinguish our chalice flame, for our worship has ended.
And our service begins. We invite you all to join in singing the chorus of the recessional, which is printed in your order of service. Tracy Howe, who wrote this song, is a minister and calls herself a social gospel leader of our time.
And the chorus goes, we will march on, we'll fight on till love comes. You'll get it. We will march on, we'll fight on till love comes. Try it with us. We will march on, we'll fight on till love comes.
If you cut into beauty and try to make it bleed, you only find a deeper cut and makes a person free. That depths of love comes from where we've been redeemed. So put down your guns and unlock the prison doors. You could keep all your money, give yourself to the poor. Learn to love, building world of grace.
We will march on, we'll fight on till love comes.
Make your words a weapon, build power out of fear, but it's your own self-breaking, fading way in the mirror, because love is writing this song. And the mystery of suffering is a life that comes of pain, and the hope we share bears it, gives it all a name, all in love to carry on. Cry.